Static floods the tape before forming a dim hallway, lit only by a shaky flashlight. Dust drifts like faint snow, and a distant metallic echo vibrates through the stale air. Camera pans slowly, revealing a rusted wheelchair angled toward a cracked wall. Its wheels glint under the weak beam, as though recently touched by an unseen hand. A narrow door creaks open without visible movement. The sound resonates unnaturally in the empty space, making the corridor feel longer and more hollow than moments before. Peeling paint curls from the walls like brittle skin. Scattered charts shift faintly on the ground, reacting to no breeze, as if stirred by footsteps that never reach the microphone. Cracked mirror reflects the flashlight in warped angles. For a split instant, a blurred shape appears behind the camera, disappearing before the lens swings back. The beam of light drifts across broken tiles, revealing muddy footprints leading deeper inside. They stop abruptly near a darkened doorway, as if the person vanished mid-step. Faint tapping echoes from inside a storage room. The camera inches closer, catching shelves filled with dusty jars. One jar trembles lightly, though the air remains still. The flashlight flickers, revealing a collapsed gurney blocking part of the hallway. Its metal frame vibrates softly, as if responding to a distant rumble felt only by the camera. An abandoned nurse station appears ahead, cluttered with scattered files. As the camera sweeps past, a stack of papers lifts slightly, then settles, untouched by any visible force. The hallway narrows into darkness. A distant hum pulses in uneven waves, distorting the audio. When the flashlight steadies, a figure-shaped shadow stretches across the floor and fades. Camera sweeps past peeling wallpaper, revealing faint handprints smeared across the wall. Some prints look small, like from a child, yet spaced too high for anyone young to reach. Metal door rattles once, sharply, as if something inside pushes back. The camera zooms slightly, catching the doorknob twitching twice before falling still in the dim corridor. The flashlight beam reveals a shattered mirror leaning against the wall. For a split second, the reflection shows a dark silhouette behind the camera, yet turning reveals only empty space. The corridor sign hangs crooked, swinging faintly though. The air is dead still. The soft creak echoes unnaturally long, stretching in a warped delay through the dusty hallway. A wheelchair sits overturned near a doorway, one wheel spinning lazily as if recently disturbed. The camera approaches, but the wheel slows instantly, as if aware it's being watched. The camera glides past a dusty nurse's station, where an old call button flickers weakly. It emits a faint chime on its own, each ring slower than the last, like something breathing through the wires. Curtain at the end of a ward shifts slightly, though the windows are sealed shut. The fabric ripples inward, as if someone behind it stepped forward, but never emerged. Rows of patient beds line the room, sheets draped over them. As the camera pans, one sheet sinks downward subtly, like weight pressing from above, rather than something rising underneath. A rusted IV stand tips slightly when approached, its wheels squeaking in a long drawn-out tone. It rocks once more after the camera stops moving, as if responding to unseen footsteps. Taped to a cracked wall, a faded staff-only sign flutters, even though the air remains still. The tape strains, peeling back inch by inch, like invisible fingers tugging from the other side. Camera enters a narrow stairwell, its steps coated in thick dust. As the beam sweeps across the railing, fresh fingerprints appear in a perfect line, none of them matching the size of a normal adult hand. Halfway down the stairs, a faint tapping echoes upward, steady and rhythmic. The sound grows sharper as the camera descends, but the bottom remains swallowed in darkness, as if the staircase stretches endlessly. A single bulb flickers violently overhead, humming with broken electricity. For a moment, the stairwell flash freezes in bright light, revealing dozens of shadowy shapes crowded along the walls. As the bulb dims, the shadows vanish completely, leaving only the creaking of old steps. The camera leans over the railing, capturing a breath, like draft rising from below, impossibly cold and steady. A metal sign labeled basement storage hangs crooked at the bottom, rattling twice as the camera approaches. The darkness beyond the doorway feels thicker, almost liquid, swallowing the flashlight beam instantly. Camera steps into the basement hall, where rows of storage lockers stand half open. Some doors sway gently, though no draft exists. One locker clicks shut on its own the moment the light passes over it. Scattered patient files lie across the floor, curled and yellowed. As the camera nears them, one sheet lifts slightly, rising as if tugged upward by invisible fingertips before falling flat again. A distant metallic clang echoes from deeper inside the basement. The camera follows the sound, each step amplifying the hollow reverb, stretching unnaturally, as if the noise were looping from inside the walls. A gurney sits abandoned near a corner, its wheels locked in place. Yet as the camera approaches, the gurney shifts a few inches, scraping softly across the concrete like something climbed onto it. At the far end, a freezer door stands ajar, releasing a dense fog that creeps across the floor. The mist curls around the camera operator's feet, moving with purpose rather than drifting. Camera leans toward the open freezer, its hinges groaning softly. Inside, the shelves are empty except for faint scratch marks lining the metal, all pointing outward as if something tried to escape. Low thump reverberates through the basement, vibrating the pipes overhead. Dust falls in tiny streams, drifting through the flashlight beam as the noise repeats, closer each time. The camera turns toward a narrow corridor branching off to the side. The darkness seems to pulse, expanding and shrinking rhythmically, like a lung inhaling in the pitch black hole. As the beam sweeps the floor, deep grooves become visible in the concrete, long, parallel, and dragging toward the corridor. The marks look recent, cutting through dust as if something heavy was pulled through. A small metal cart blocks the path ahead. When the camera approaches, it rolls backward slowly, wheels squeaking a single sharp note, stopping only once it disappears into the darkness. Camera hesitates before entering the corridor. A faint whisper rises from the darkness, too soft to form words, yet shaped like someone speaking directly into the microphone from inches away. Farther in, a single overhead light flickers to life, buzzing violently beneath it. A mop bucket sits overturned, water trailing in a line that leads deeper, as if someone dragged it while limping. The camera follows the wet trail until it ends abruptly at a closed door. As the operator reaches for the handle, the door pulses inward once like something pressed its weight from the other side. When the door finally creaks open, the room beyond is empty except for a single chair facing the corner. The chair rocks slowly, legs tapping the floor in an offbeat rhythm, as if responding to a distant signal. Into the wall behind the chair, a faded patient chart flutters once despite the stale air. The camera zooms in, revealing shaky handwriting repeating the same phrase, "Don't turn around." The camera slowly backs away from the chart, the warning repeating in the operator's breathing. A faint shuffle sounds behind the camera, but the view never turns. Only the shadows on the wall twist oddly. Leaving the room, the corridor feels narrower than before, as if the walls have inched closer. The flashlight beam bends slightly, warping at the edges like the darkness is pushing back. A gurney crosses the far end of the hallway, rolling silently without any visible force. It drifts from left to right, never speeding up, never slowing, disappearing into a room with no lights. The camera approaches the room. The gurney is gone. Only its faint wheel marks remain on the dusty floor, curving sharply into a corner too tight for anything to fit through. Sudden metallic clang erupts overhead, echoing like something sprinting across the vents. Dust rains down in thin streams while the ceiling groans, bending slightly under invisible weight. The hallway lights flicker in a broken rhythm as the camera moves forward. For a moment, multiple shadows stretch ahead on the floor. Far more than one person should cast. each moving at a slightly different pace. Metal door marked utility stands partly open. As the camera nears, it slams shut with violent force, the echo rolling down the hall like distant thunder before fading into a low whisper. Inside, a single string light swings overhead, casting shifting stripes across the shelves. The bulb dims and brightens irregularly, each flicker revealing a silhouette in a different corner of the room. A toolbox clatters to the ground, spilling rusty tools across the concrete. One wrench spins in place for far too long, rotating steadily even after all other motion in the room has stopped. At the back of the room, a vent cover vibrates softly, screws rattling as if something inside is trying to push through. The camera edges closer, the metal bending slightly outward with each pulse. Vent suddenly falls silent. As the camera leans closer, a faint exhale drifts through the grate slow, steady, unmistakably human. The dust on the metal ripples outward, as if reacting to warm breath. The camera retreats into the hallway, where the air now feels heavier. Each step echoes with a slight delay, like the sound is bouncing off something just behind the operator, following closely. Far down the hall, a figure appears for a split second, tall, thin, motionless. The lights blink once, and it vanishes completely, leaving only a faint smear of static drifting in the air. The camera approaches the spot where the figure stood. The floor tiles here are cracked in a perfect circle, as if something heavy landed with tremendous force, yet no debris lies anywhere nearby. Soft dragging sound begins behind the camera slow, scraping, uneven. The view never turns, but the audio grows louder, closer, until the operator's breathing becomes shallow and unsteady. The dragging finally stops, replaced by a faint tapping, slow at first, then quicker, like fingers drumming impatiently on metal. The sound echoes from every direction, impossible to pinpoint. The fire extinguisher mounted to the wall begins shaking violently in its bracket. The metal rattles against the screws, vibrating harder, until it abruptly goes still the moment the camera steps closer. The lights surge brighter for a moment, revealing a long smear across the wall, dark, wet, trailing toward an open doorway. The streak glistens under the beam, as if still fresh. Inside the room, overturned cabinets block most of the floor. The camera crawls between them, revealing deep gouges cut into the wood, each slash perfectly parallel, like made by enormous claws. A portable monitor sits on the ground, screen flickering with unstable static. For a moment, a face appears, blurry, featureless, inches from the lens, before the display snaps back to pure noise. Monitor abruptly powers off, plunging the room into deeper darkness. The camera captures faint footprints on the dusty floor, bare, narrow, and facing directly toward the operator's position. As the flashlight shifts, the footprints multiply, forming a staggered path leading back into the hallway. Each new print appears subtly deeper, as if something is gaining weight with every step. A wheelchair at the hallway's end begins rolling toward the camera, silent, steady, perfectly aligned. It moves in a straight line, wheels spinning without wobble, as if guided by invisible hands. The wheelchair stops abruptly inches from the lens, its seat cushion indents slightly, like something just sat down. The fabric creaks once, then relaxes, settling into a shape that isn't visible. The overhead lights flicker rapidly, strobing the hallway in uneven flashes. In each burst, faint silhouettes appear farther down the corridor, growing clearer, closer, and more numerous. Silhouettes freeze as the lights return to a dim glow, but the air hums with a low vibration, like a distant generator. The camera steps back, and the shadows subtly lean forward in response. Deep groan echoes through the hall, bending the metal pipes overhead. One pipe bursts, releasing a cold mist that crawls along the ceiling, tracing the outline of something large moving above the operator. The lights black out for a second. When they return, the corridor walls are smeared with fresh marks, long streaks dragging downward, as if dozens of hands slid across the surface at once. The hallway behind the camera erupts with rapid footsteps, circling yet never approaching. The lens shakes violently as something brushes past, leaving a chilling hiss directly beside the microphone. Camera sprints toward the exit light ahead, but the bulb flickers out just before reaching it. The footage warps, colors bleeding as the tape distorts, then freezes on a single frame of something standing behind.